He made a little boat and came down the river, to the place where the water was drawn, to the place where the girl drew water. Hokti uiwan akeles. The woman dies in Wiwa, Wiwa. It's oceanic, I said, what was lost, when I told her. Our first instructions were ways to speak water.
The ideas presented in this film series are the efforts of countless individuals who are committed to protecting Texas water resources and ensuring their continued availability for all citizens for decades to come. The first step is to recognize that water is our most essential, indispensable resource, and that access to clean water is the basic right of all citizens.
We're going to need water as long as there's people. When the oil's gone and the gas is gone and the sun turns off and all those other things, people have to have water. And because of that, it has to be treated differently.
But they cannot do it alone. Through educating the public about water use, incentivizing conservation, and funding emergency technologies, Texans may be able to safeguard their water resources for the foreseeable future. If water is not made a priority, Texas could face tremendous losses, both socially and financially.
How do you take into account the value of water for future generations? How far out do you extrapolate the value of that water? 100 years? 150 years? That's not something that is a pricing problem. It's a moral problem.
The business community in the state is going to have to get involved in this education effort, because the economic consequences of an inadequate water supply are enormous. Billions and billions of dollars.
If water is not made a priority, Texas could face tremendous losses, both socially and financially. If a prolonged cycle of statewide drought, such as Texas experienced from late 2010 to mid-2015, persists in coming years, we could see losses in excess of $170 billion of productivity and over 800,000 jobs by 2070, all due solely to insufficient or undependable water supplies.
I think what has become a real realization is that people were not educated. They really did not talk about water and what it cost in water. That how people survived on surface water in North Texas really never was part of the conversations in that area. People in Houston were really very used to cheap water.
If Corpus Christi, if those plants had to shut down, that region would be devastated economically.
They really didn't think about conserving water. They didn't think about the cost of building up public systems all over the Houston metropolitan area.
An unreliable municipal water supply would not only endanger public health and safety, but could interfere with activity in homes, schools, business, and the government.
We are probably all paying as little today for our water as we ever will in the future. Conservation and reuse are important, but conservation and reuse are not enough. Drought really is a typical state for Texas, and we need to adapt to that future.
In Flint, Michigan, due to a lack of funding, the city was forced to switch water sources. The change to a supply with lower quality, without imposing adequate safeguards, caused a chemical reaction with aging cast iron pipes and resulted in contamination of the water, including lead, bacteria, and other disease-causing organisms. This left the city without clean drinking water. And while officials were handling the problem, many residents were exposed. Criminal charges were filed against government administrators and state workers, and millions of dollars were required for crisis mitigation.
That's just the way it is. You use the cheapest source of water first, groundwater. Okay, well, once we've used that to the extent we feel is safe, you go to the next cheapest supply, Lake Conroe, because it's right in our backyard. Well, the next source of supply is much more expensive, whether that's desal, brackish groundwater, or bringing water over from the Trinity River, whatever it is, it's enormously expensive.
As a utility director, I woke up every morning thinking, okay, what can happen today that's going to affect my customers, get the media on my tail, and get the council upset at me and my department. So it's a constant struggle to keep things together, keep the pipes flowing.
We have a finite supply available here. We have so much groundwater that we can take advantage of. We have a lake with surface water we can take advantage of, but the population's growing. And if you will conserve and do more now, I can stretch these current supplies further into the future and put off enormous investments of capital. But I can't get them to think 20 or 30 years down the road.
Changes in our climate and drought are not the only threats to our water supply. Flooding and contamination of groundwater are issues that also deserve more attention.
To have that drought suddenly ended by devastating flooding in the Gulf Coast and elsewhere throughout Texas takes our attention, does it not, off of long-range water supply planning.
Look at water infrastructure and water supply as part of a holistic systems approach to the city. It's never isolated, it affects everything, and unless you look at an approach and try and solve the problem that way, you're not going to make any progress in the long run.
Flooding is becoming more common in Texas cities, and many are not prepared for such events. In April and again in May of 2016, 24 counties in the Gulf Coast of Texas experienced flood levels along the Brazos and San Jacinto rivers and their upstream tributaries. In some counties, flooding reached levels not seen in over 100 years. To avoid such damage in the future, proper planning and investment in flood control infrastructure is necessary.
We're also spending billions of dollars to funnel the water that does land in cities as quickly as we possibly can out of the city and into rivers that then become choked with sediment and overrun with floodwater, and ultimately into the Gulf of Mexico, which, I said earlier, is critically starved of freshwater inflows during droughts, but also doesn't want all the water that the urban populations of Texas push down into their storm drains and into rivers as fast as they possibly can during rains.
We have to start looking at the strategies that are available to us, everything from conservation to the various technical strategies like aquifer storage and recovery, desalination, wastewater reuse. These are things that can be done. They're not cheap, but they need to happen, because if we don't start using those strategies and develop our water sources, we're going to be in a world of hurt as we continue to grow.
Texas faces problems with water that are complex and ever-changing. As our state continues to grow in all directions, these issues become increasingly urgent and further nuanced. Preventive measures, such as building levees and updating infrastructure to control flooding, and developing contingency plans for water supplies and water use in case of contamination, are necessary to avoid or address these issues.
So it's going to be difficult for the state to provide the funding we might want. I think we have to do whatever we can. That means the legislature needs to get involved to some degree to make it as easy as possible for private financing to work for us and to be feasible. And it includes everything from removing restrictions that may make it difficult that you guys can tell us what they are. We as engineers really don't worry with that too much. Maybe we should.
People don't tend to work together, and that's one of the things that have to start happening. You have all the agencies that have their narrow sequence, their narrow scope, but there's not this even exchange of ideas or let's work together on that. So politics is one, the other is education.
And even if we do figure out how to produce water, create water at an affordable per gallon price or per 1,000-gallon price, the infrastructure for delivering that to users is only going to age, require maintenance, and have to expand with population growth, and Texas is still a growing state.
Water's nonpartisan, but it's totally political. And decisions are made based upon politics and history and the historical way it's been done, as opposed to using updated data and looking at what's happening. We're in a new normal, The old rules don't work anymore.
We need to open it up so that private industry feels welcome and can come in and do what they need to do. Part of the issue is risk. They're willing to take some risk, but there's a point of how much risk they will take. We got to figure out where that point is and do what we can to encourage it.
Education is key in making people understand it's everyone's problem. Everyone has to work with conservation.
Is it the legislature's responsibility? Is it the regional district's responsibility? Who has decision-making authority? And for that matter, who's looking at the big picture of what the state's needs are?
As our state continues to grow in all directions, these issues become increasingly urgent and further nuanced. While growth across the state is guaranteed, consistent rainfall in the absence of droughts are not. Action is necessary to guarantee prosperity across Texas for years to come. The time to make water a priority is now. We can do better.
Ichipachkasasa Creek, Anadi Chubco, Long Delay, Anita Chopco Creek, Chado Huspa, Rock Wall, Chadahospi Creek, Koha Chanoxie, Cane Ridge, Chickasanoxie Creek, Loja Turtle, Loksahatchee, Osa Pokeweed, Osahatchee, Onozo Mudcat, Onoshahatchee, Chiddo Snake, Chidihatchee, Oktaha Sand, Oktahatchee, Ikfunjgo Tick, Ifkanjohatchee, Ejan Finoki, Quivering Earth, Okefenoki Swamp, Ogabilgo Swamp, Obilwa, Boiling, Mulgus, Okmulgi, Mulberry, Ki, Kioki, Oki, Hitchity, Water.